Well, thank you very much for joining us. Today I'm with Marco BUSCA, who is the head of Indirect Private Debt at Generali AM. Thank you very much for joining us, Marco. I wonder if you might begin by just giving us a short introduction to Generali and perhaps the part of the business in which you operate as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for inviting me. I actually run the indirect private debt business in Generali Asset Management. Generali Asset Management is one of the affiliates in the Generali investment holding space. Personally, I run a fund-of-fund business which take care of investing the capital of the Generali insurance company in the various private debt areas, from direct lending to credit opportunity to asset-based lending. And more recently, we launched a private credit secondaries fund, which we will talk about now.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah, I know you launched that private credit secondary strategy earlier this year. What makes the current market and now the right time to be doing that, to be going into secondaries in the private credit market?
Absolutely. To have a good secondary market, you first need to have a very solid and stable and big primary market. So the private credit primary market now reached a 1.6 trillion asset under management and recently had 15% of growth, and we expect to be at 3 trillion in few years. Secondary market, the so-called adoption rate has been around 1% per year. And we expect that it goes like the private equity secondaries at 2% per year. What this means? That we expect a much bigger deal flows in the secondary business. So this is a big tailwind on the secondary market. The second reason is because private credit funds has been launched a few years ago, and now there are many funds that are in harvesting period, and this becomes, a big source of potential investment. The third, tailwind that are pushing the secondary is that the market is becoming much more sophisticated, with a pool of capitals dedicated to private debt secondaries, obviously. Before, secondaries maybe were treated by equity secondaries that, looked with their left hand also on credit, but now there is much more focus on the secondaries in credit.
Are there any macro structural trends that you're seeing that are helping to drive deal flow beyond what you've already discussed?
Yeah, absolutely. The market is mostly driven by two types of transactions. LP-led transaction and GP-led transaction. They have different rationale behind that. The rationale behind the LP-led transaction are the fact that investors like us now thinks that their alternative investment can have such a turnover in a part of that. So we are start thinking that there can be portfolio management activities even for an alternative book, either private equity or also private credit now. So there are much more occasion that you find investors that want to sell a fund, take the liquidity and use for something else. And this is the great push on LP-led. The GP-led transaction, so the creation of continuation vehicle in private credit, actually is driven by three major factors that are also what I call the three-win situation. Because you have funds that are in harvesting mode. There is this portfolio that most of the time is performing, so it's not a continuation vehicle on single asset, but it's a continuation vehicle on performing portfolio, where the current asset managers want to provide an option to the current investor. An option to keep invested in the same portfolio performing, but with a leverage line, because the continuation vehicle most of the time is levered. So invest in the same space, but with a double-digit return. So this is the first benefit that is also beneficial for the GP, because as a second plus, there is new investors coming in the continuation vehicle, meaning that the asset manager can have a greater investor base. So the first is the liquidity option for the current. The second is a new investment proposition for buyers like secondary. And the third, in my opinion, is more philosophical, but is also very important for investors, which is the transparency in the market, because secondaries creates transparency. There has been some question marks on valuation, private credit. In a secondaries, there are no question marks because the buyers look entirely at the portfolio and they see what are the pros and cons. So there is much more, communication and transparency on the books.
So that should be beneficial for the market as a whole.
Yeah, that was I meant.
Yeah. Okay. Obviously, sounds like there are a lot of opportunities out there. How specifically is your Generali Private Credit Secondaries fund going to try and capitalize on those? And potentially, how does that differ from what else is available in the market at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. We try to be one of the first mover in the space because, as I said, the space has a potential growth. On the other hand, we are also trying to differentiate ourselves. How we are trying to do this? Because we created a partnership with a big private markets manager that is Partners Group, that is our investment advisor and distributor. Why we choose them? We did this partnership together because we can combine both expertise. We have a long expertise as being a fund of fund manager or fund selecting. They have a long expertise in private equity secondaries, direct lending. And every deal is reviewed by both investment committee. Their investment committee is provide a recommendation. Our investment committee is the final decision maker. And obviously we are using also their big distribution network to find clients. The second differentiation point is that we are trying to overweight as much as possible Europe because this market has been much more US, but we are trying to create a portfolio that is slightly overweight Europe. We are trying to create, knowledge and traction in Europe for this market, for secondaries. And finally, we are trying to balancing two things, LP and GP-led transaction and traditional core secondaries opportunity and more opportunistic secondaries opportunity.
Okay, great. And a final question for you, if that's okay. How would you say the fund's positioned to capture some of the opportunities that are there now, but also in the next phase of the cycle that we might see?
Yeah, I mean, these funds, this type of funds, the secondary, is a very flexible strategy and is able to adapt according to the market. There is a market there are more LP-led, there's a market with more GP-led, is a market in which clients require more deployment. This is a strategy that actually targets to mitigate the J-curve. Then also one of our strength point that is very important for this market cycle is the fact that we are able to see a lot of deal flows because we are an LP, so we have access, we're being whitelisted by a lot of clients. So we're trying to balance the benefit of the strategy, which are a lot, with the benefit of our proposition and our expertise in order to be flexible and adaptable to where the market is going because there is not yet a consolidation in the market like direct lending, but it's a market that is growing.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you for inviting me.